Hi, this is John Linneball, and this is SAT Essay Writing, Bare Bones Edition 9/15/20. That is September 15th, 2020. And I'm John at johnlinneball.com. My office number is 415-986-7355, and you can reach me at www.johnlinneball.com. Abbreviated bare bones instructions. This is the bare bones abbreviated version of the advice I've given in other videos in case you don't want to spend an hour watching me write an essay while on video. This should help you, and if you have questions, please watch my other videos on the SAT essay or contact me. Let's get started. Read the instructions in advance. The essay instructions never change. As with everything else on any major standardized test, nothing on the SAT changes without years of advance notice. New exam elements, that is, instructions, questions, etc., being tested and sample problems being distributed so you'll know before you actually have to take an SAT that counts with something new on it. That, plus the generic nature of the instructions, means it's really easy and to your advantage to read and understand the instructions before the test so you won't have to read them on test day. A quick skim is fine if you like. The instructions tell you all you need to write a great SAT essay. So, for example, here are the instructions. As you read the passage below, you can see how I'll try that again. As you read the passage below, consider how Eric Kleinenberg uses evidence, such as facts or examples, to support claims, reasoning to develop ideas and to connect claims and evidence, and stylistic or persuasive elements such as word choice or appeals to emotion to add power to the ideas expressed. So we can see Eric Kleinenberg is the person who wrote this essay, which looks like it was probably an editorial in Time magazine. So we can see that the author's name is always going to be here, so you can just say, as you read the passage below, consider how author uses evidence, reasoning, and stylistic or persuasive elements. Okay, at the end, it has even more. It says, write an essay in which you explain how, in this case, Eric Kleinenberg builds an argument to persuade his audience that Americans need to greatly reduce their reliance on air conditioning. In your essay, analyze how the author uses one or more of the features listed in the box above or features of your own choice to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. Your essay should not explain whether you agree with Kleinenberg's, whoever the author's is, claims, but rather explain how Kleinenberg builds an argument to persuade his audience. Other times it would be a female author, so it would be her audience. All right. So those instructions really tell you everything. Like, for example, as we saw here, the argument, the point is here, it's that Americans need to greatly reduce their reliance on air conditioning. That's right there. They will always, always, always tell you what the author's point was in case you can't figure it out from reading it. So you could actually write the introductory and the conclusory paragraphs, not great ones, but you could write adequate ones simply by reading the instructions and not even reading the actual essay, other than, well, you should actually know the title. So I guess, okay, you would actually have to read the title, which is not in the instructions, but basically you wouldn't actually have to read this whole part here to come up with a fairly decent introduction and a fairly decent conclusion, which is just kind of a reworded introduction. So here we go. The beginning instructions. So it says, as you read the passage below, as we just saw, consider how the author uses evidence such as facts and examples to support claims, reasoning to develop ideas and evidence, stylistic or persuasive evidence such as word choice or appeals to emotion to add power to the ideas expressed. So these are called ethos, logos, and pathos respectively, because ethos is evidence. You can think like ethics. Reasoning, think logic, logos. Pathos, stylistic or persuasive elements such as word choice or appeals to emotions to add power to the ideas. So you can think of an emotion. Have you ever heard anything or anyone called pathetic? It usually means it's weak and sad. So that's an emotion. So you can think that appeals to your emotions, Won't you please help me? I'm so helpless. That's an appeal to your emotions from someone or something that's trying to appear pathetic. So if you use these terms, and you should, define them for the grader so they know you didn't just memorize them without really learning their meaning. So you should put ethos evidence such as facts and examples, logos, reasoning, pathos, word choice or appeals to emotion, stylistic or persuasive evidence. So normally we'll see them listed in this order: ethos, pathos, and logos, but the College Board listed them in a different order, probably to see if you would notice and know how to handle it. If somebody says, oh, logos is reasoning, but, if they said, well, sorry, ethos, pathos, logos, oh, pathos must mean reasoning, no, it doesn't. So they could catch somebody in that little trap there. The instructions will give you an intro, as I said. So as I said, you can write a decent but not truly great introduction to an SAT essay without doing more than reading the instructions in the beginning and end of the passage. Well, because as we've seen, every passage you're given on the SAT is a persuasive essay designed to convince the reader, that's you, of whatever point the author's trying to make. It's always going to be a newspaper or a magazine editorial or something very similar to that. It's going to be a persuasive essay. So even better and easier for you doing your job as a junior literary critic, where you say how the author makes his or her case, the SAT lists the author's point, as I just told you, after the passage. No, really, they do. So you could write reasonably acceptable introductions and conclusions for SAT essays without reading more than the instructions. Lots of book jacket summary / teaser writers just read the first and last few chapters. I've heard the first 3 and the last 3. And, they write those little blurbs or little summaries that appear inside the dust jacket or on the back of the dust jacket of a hardcover or kind of on the back of a paperback book. So this method isn't unheard of, and I've certainly seen summaries or teasers that were misleading and indicated to me that whoever wrote it didn't really read the book very carefully or didn't read the whole book. Anyway, that's okay. In your case, you can write one that would say, oh, okay, this kid probably actually read this and understands it, even though you didn't really read it. But you're not going to be able to give very good examples if you don't actually read the thing, so you should. So as I said before, the end box gives you the main point. The little box there, the College Board literally tells you the author's point and lets you know that showing how the author makes that point should be the topic of your essay. If the topic of your essay is anything but how this person makes his or her point, and they tell you what the point is, you are going to get a very bad grade. So an essay that's completely written on a different topic, written on a completely different topic, I should say, will score a 0. An essay that merely agrees or disagrees with the author's point won't do too well either. I had a student who had on a real SAT an essay where she had to discuss how the ACLU, whoever it was from the American Civil Liberties Union, made a convincing argument that school uniforms should not be used in American high schools. Being a typical teenager, she did not want anyone telling her what to wear to school, so she agreed very strongly with it, so she got a very high grade on the reading, comprehension. I think she did okay on the writing, but as far as the analysis, she got a very low grade because she really didn't analyze it, she just agreed with it. So here, for the essay that we looked at, write an essay in which you explain how Eric Kleinenberg builds an argument to persuade his audience that Americans need to greatly reduce their reliance on air conditioning. In your essay, analyze how Kleinenberg uses one or more of the features listed in the box above, or features of your own choice, to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. So if something sticks out to you that seems to be the main way that the author makes his or her point, make sure that you feature that right away. So what we're going to do here in most of these is just, point out ethos, pathos, and logos. And we're not going to just rewrite the instructions, as you might be saying here. Well, so just rewrite the instructions? No, don't do that, because you're going to need to actually come up with the examples in the body paragraphs, the ones between the introduction and the conclusion. And it's a good idea to refer to the same examples that you're going to put in your body paragraphs in the introduction and the conclusion. You can even just leave spaces for the examples if you want. So you could say, Kleinenberg uses ethos in the form of, and since you haven't read it yet, you don't know, but fine, put a couple lines worth of space, whatever, at least one line worth of space, so you can write in what the examples are. If you don't know where to start on the body paragraphs, let's say you're like, geez, there's a lot of really great techniques, this person uses a lot of techniques, just pick one of the big three. Pick ethos, pathos, or logos, and explain how the author uses that thing persuasively. Make that your first body paragraph, and then you'll continue on to pathos and continue on to logos. So let's do it in order. We'll just pick ethos. So ethos is authoritative opinion, commonly known facts, news reports, history. News has been called the first draft of history. I don't know who that quote is from, but you can probably look it up on Google. Moral statements, rules, laws, statistics, scientific facts, basically anything most people would accept as true, especially if it's coming from an authoritative source. But ethos can also just be common sense. So any survey, article in a scholarly journal, historical facts, common sense observations about everyday occurrences, water is wet, recent events, scientific and mathematical principles, etc., those are all ethos. Now pathos. Pathos is word choice, rhetorical tricks, techniques, generally appeals to emotion. Okay, we can refer to two different things very differently to get a very different emotion. If I refer to pepperoni as yummy Italian pizza sausage, that's a lot different than if I call it pieces of dead pig. So you see what I mean. All right. Something that's pathetic is sad or weak to the point that it appeals to your sense of pity. I mean, if you have somebody, oh, please, I'm caught in the rain and I don't have any money to take the bus home. Won't you please give me $2 for the bus? Okay, that's very pathetic and sad. It appeals to your sense of pity. So you can just think pathos is really anything that appeals to any emotion, not just your sense of pity. But, the emotion can be anything that appeals to any emotion. Can be pride, love, happiness, jealousy, moral outrage, patriotism, whatever. So you might see something like this. Can you seriously tell today's kindergartners that they won't earn much money or live long because you don't want to spend an extra few dollars on taxes for education? Not to mention who's going to contribute to your Social Security. There's nothing like giving someone a vision of punishing innocent children by not giving them good schools or a good education, or you, when you're an old person, your old person self is living in some crappy apartment eating cat food for dinner because you couldn't pay taxes or wouldn't pay taxes to support education, so now your Social Security payments have been radically cut because, well, the kids of today who are now the people who are now the adults who are the kids from yesterday aren't earning enough money to pay enough in Social Security taxes to pay your Social Security. So that would certainly be a very good appeal to emotion there. Now, logos. Logos is just straight up logic. Usually the logic in these passages is straightforward. Once you have facts, opinions, emotions, or morals that are ethos or pathos, usually facts, opinions, morals, those would be ethos. Morals could also be pathos. Pathos is also, of course, emotions. We can apply logic to those facts, opinions, emotions, or morals to get a result. So if you believe something is wrong, then you shouldn't do it. Makes sense, right? That's simple logic. So otherwise, if you do it, either you're a bad person or it's not really wrong. So for those of you who remember your logic from geometry and things like that, this is the contrapositive in action. So if an action is wrong, don't do it. The contrapositive of that is, well, if you did it, it must not be wrong. So, or it could be, if you did it, you're not a bad person. Say good people don't do wrong things. So a good person doesn't do bad things. If you did a bad thing, then you must not be a good person. Or if you did something that people call a bad thing, it must be that it's not really bad, because that would be the contrapositive, etc. So that's just basic logic. What if I don't like the passage? Well, welcome to the SAT. We have to do a lot of things we don't like on the SAT. Much like other standardized tests that ask you to evaluate or utilize materials, some of the materials may be designed to offend or at least mildly annoy some people. Don't fall into the trap, like my one student, of arguing against the author or arguing with the author. Even if you think his or her point is stupid, or you think it's really, really great and it's awesome and you can't wait to tell the grader how awesome the idea is, And if the person's either stupid, crazy, a liar, or the best writer ever, doesn't matter. Just point out the problem you see and explain the passage could be stronger if you think the person is stupid, crazy, lying, or just complete, willfully ignorant of an obvious counter-argument. That would be the thing you can do if you think the argument is stupid. You could say, well, you can use your disagreement as a tool to deconstruct, analyze, dissect, whatever you want to call it, the argument. So if it seems like a really stupid or clever but wrong, a fancy word for that is sophistry, or a sophisticated word for that, argument to you, think about what tricks the author uses to reach that conclusion. And if you do run into something like that, you could say, well, the author uses sophistry here when it says, well, people say it's wrong to steal 2 cookies, but I only stole 1, so it must be okay. Obviously, that's sophistry. If you really, really agree with the person, again, don't just talk about how great they are or how great this argument, the argument is without explaining how the argument is great, what tools, what rhetorical tricks, what facts, what kind of logic this person uses, what appeals to emotion this person uses to make his or her argument either, okay? So again, you can point out passage problems. You can use the dislike you have of the passage to point out problems with the passage. Okay, if there's an outright factual error, it's wrong. They say 2 + 2 is 5. It's unlikely they're going to do that. They say, well, no one's ever landed on the moon and this thing was written in 2020. That's not right. So whether it's deliberate, a lie, or it's unintentional, just sloppy research, reliance on unreliable sources, erroneous interpretations of statements, lots of people take things the wrong way, so they'll give you something that doesn't make sense. Like you could say when there's no correlation between a personality trait and the way a person was raised. Well, you can show that every personality trait that a person has who's an alcoholic, they have either more or less than the general population. So you say, oh, well, going to extremes in raising your children will cause them to be alcoholics. Well, no, that's not what it says. Its point is somebody who grows up to be an alcoholic generally doesn't have any kind of a different background or a different personality than someone who doesn't grow up to be an alcoholic. All right, sloppy research. If you rely on something that's been disproven, or it's one experiment of 1,000 that came out with that result, that's not great. Reliance on unreliable sources. Hey, we all know of certain news outlets that like to distort the facts. You can figure out which ones are unreliable and which ones are reliable. So the same goes for logical fallacies, outdated or disproven evidence. And finally, of course, ad hominem, literally meaning to the man, or ad feminem, to the woman attacks. So, for example, this is true. Albert Einstein, back when he was practicing physics, a physicist in Switzerland, German Jews called him a Swiss atheist. They didn't feel he was religious enough. He was Jewish. And the Nazis, when they were coming to power, accused him, in quotes, of practicing Jewish physics. I am not making this up. That's about as ad hominem. Well, both of those are about as ad hominem as attacks get. It's like, well, is the fact that he's an atheist really proof that he's not good at physics? And the Nazis, well, come on, they're Nazis. Jewish physics, what the heck is that? Anyway, you might find an argument is based on hypothetical situations or appeals to emotion that aren't backed by real-world facts. If I just say, well, I think that school funding is icky, so we shouldn't do it. Cool people wouldn't do it. Well, you'd say, well, okay, that's a nice emotional argument, but you haven't shown me any facts that a lack of school funding won't hurt us or that school funding doesn't help us, so I'm just going to let that go. Obviously, if you see any kind of obvious factual problem, obvious logical problem, or, usually you just see an appeal to emotion that isn't backed by anything, you can point that out and say, well, this could be a much stronger argument if he actually provided any evidence to prove his point. You want to save the problems for last, though. So your assignment is not to explain whether you agree with the author's claims, but rather how the author builds an argument to persuade his or her arguments according to the directions. So make sure that you've explained everything the author does right. Basically, how does the author make his or her argument? These are going to be from major newspapers and magazines and things like that. So they're very unlikely to have just obvious lack of evidence or obvious logical fallacies. And then you can point out what the author did wrong if you have time. So, there's not likely to be too many ad hominem attacks or arguments from invective, which is just name calling, or reliance on obviously unreliable sources such as supermarket tabloids or parody websites like The Onion. But they might cite to obviously partisan websites on political issues, or a corporate website's information might provide information saying, oh, well, people ask, is XYZ Corporation a good corporation? Well, I'm glad you came to xyz.com and asked. Yes, we are a fine corporation. Obviously, that's not going to help you very much. So you can always point out the problems once you're done explaining how the author actually does a great job of making his or her argument, even if you don't agree with it. So, the outline of how to write the SAT essay. The layout is 1. Introduction. Simple paragraph from the instructions. The author, whoever it is, name the author, does a great job, skillfully creates an argument, using, ethos, pathos, and logos to support his or her thesis that McDonald's hamburgers are the best hamburgers you can buy. You basically just want to list brief examples of ethos, pathos, and logos after you define them. So ethos in the form of survey results and, test results from scientists around the world. Pathos in a dire warning about what will happen if we don't abide by the instructions that are given by scientists. And logos, just if you can avoid something bad, then you should avoid something bad. Those would be logos. Ethos. Well, anyway, the point is, of course, at the end here. So you're going to use ethos, pathos, and logos to make it at the end, to explain how the author makes his or her point, and that is in the box at the end, that being the point. Okay, little confused there, sorry about that. Ethos. We want to find the facts cited in the passage. So those are going to be things like factual statistics. Those are going to be quotes from authoritative figures. If you're quoting Einstein on physics, that's ethos. If you're quoting Einstein on what kind of sweater looks the nicest, that's not really ethos, because he's not authoritative on fashion, he's authoritative on physics. Pathos. You want to show how the language is chosen to appeal to your emotions. So again, if you're using descriptive words, adjectives, and adverbs to make something sound good or make something sound bad, or attacking something or supporting something, that's pathos. Logos. You want to show the assumptions underlying the argument and the logic that relies on those assumptions. Conclusion. You want to rephrase the introduction about what a great job the author did. The author uses ethos, ethos in the form of statistics and common sense. Pathos in the form of persuasive descriptive language, interpreting the ethos, and logos, explaining that, well, if you can do something good, you should do something good, especially if it won't cost you very much in time, money, or effort. Those are things that you can use to explain how the author did a great job making his or her point, even again if you don't agree with it. And finally, if you have time, you can say this could have been made stronger by blah blah blah, but it's still a very effective essay in support of whatever the author's point is. Did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to this channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? Well, it's very simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time, and I definitely don't have anywhere near 1,000 subscribers. For the same reason, you are not only welcome but encouraged to share links to this video, put in playlists, etc. I'm always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls, or things that are off topics, spammers and disturbed people. So you can contact me at 415-623-4251. That's my cell phone. You can text me at that number as well. My email is john@johnlinneball.com. Mail is 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. Thanks for watching. If you have a copyright issue or some other problem, feel free to contact me. And here's the final contact information. On Facebook, you can find my business at www.facebook.com/Linneball Tutoring, all one word. Instagram, HTTPS, secure / it's www.instagram.com/john.linneball.tutoring. My phone number at my home office is 415-986-7355. My email is john@johnlinneball.com. Website is www.johnlinneball.com. Also, johnlinneball.tutoring.com takes you to the same website. And I have a locals.com page at testpreparation.locals.com where I will be putting up some special bonus content for people who subscribe. So don't you want to feel special? Well, support me on locals.com. All right. Hope you have a good day. Hope this helps. Good luck on the SAT.